Okay, so we're back to show off a little bit more of the marbles development. So all these videos I'm mostly making in the same day, if that kind of helps figure out the chronological timeline of how quick this is developing, plus, you know, doing other things in between. But one of the things I kind of been working for, I would say the last couple hours, is trying to get the renders to do a little bit more. Now the end goal would be to get some kind of colorization going on this, so that way you can customize the marbles, do something with them. For the moment, I'm just going to RNG it, just so we can get a version out the door that people can use and everything else. But with this, we've kind of got this really crude coloring of the center star, and the outer kind of, I would call it the glass shell. It doesn't look the greatest, and you can kind of notice a little bit more of the shape due to this, but it is at least for the most part functional. So you can now tell which marbles are going on, move them around, you know, etc. Kind of get a little bit more gauge of what is really happening with any kind of contraptions you're building or any kind of like fun novelty things that you've constructed to utilize these marbles. The other thing I've kind of figured out since the last video, this is kind of pointed out by Kinsey, is that you can use path blocks to capture the marbles, and this is kind of thanks to the fact the marbles are now about 1 pixel in collision box size. So if we actually get up to the collision box, I have made them smaller. This way they can actually get a lot closer to each other, and you can get a little bit more interesting collision effects. So as we bounce them around, the path blocks will captivate them, which is really nice because it means you can build some really nice stuff with these. Another thing we figured out is that soul sand will kind of capture them. Now this already makes sense for most people who know what soul sand does, is that when you walk over it, you're kind of going to fall in soul sand, you're going to kind of get stuck. But for marbles, it creates this interesting effect that they basically vanish when they enter soul sand, and you won't see them, which is kind of bad because it makes them difficult to pick up. But the other cool thing it lets you do is you put a hopper below it, and this is not custom logic, this is just how vanilla works. It will actually grab stuff above this, and I wonder if this actually works with items. I actually have not played around too much with a lot of vanilla mechanics because I am very much been using modded for an incredibly long period of time. But the idea is that this, because yeah, that does behave the same exact way. I think this is unique to soul sand in some regard, is because it doesn't have a full collision box, so the collision box actually does stop a couple pixels short of the top, that it will captivate items. I wonder if this is similar if we put an actual solid block above it. So if we do this, it does not work that way. That is really interesting. Do we have any slaps? Because I want to play around with this behavior just a little bit more, because the more interesting stuff we figure out like this, the more you can do with the marbles without actually having mods installed, because mods kind of put a requirement on you that you need to be able to have more installed and more knowledge and everything else. But it does look like anything that isn't a full solid block, the hopper is picking up above it, which is cool because this means more options for builds, because now you can do stuff like this, for example, and create a goalpost for your marbles to go through. So when you have an actual contraption, because right now we do have stairs, stairs do offer momentum to the marbles, which is really, really nice because it gives you a way to push the marbles around without having to rely on another mod to do this work for you, and without me having to add a ton of content to the mod that you may not necessarily need. Because I can add a block that pushes entities around, but you may go, oh, but this other mod already had that, or this mod had this, or this other customization, or maybe I wanted to do it via water physics, for example. So we can do this, and we've now created a goalpost for ourselves, where we actually can now track which marbles entered. And because right now they do stack, but as I get the coloring on here, what you can basically do with these is say this was a red, say this was a green, you can start figuring out which one entered the hopper first via your race. And if you're doing a marble race down a whole bunch of stairs and contraptions, you can now figure out who won, for example, via purely vanilla means, without having to have mods, without having to have a lot of other stuff. I can't even imagine what this is going to look like with command blocks and stuff, but there's a lot you can do and a lot of possibility. Anyways, I'll leave you there and I'll continue working on this.